I thought that the third video really was, in some ways, the most compelling of all of them. And I was, I'll admit, slightly kicking myself because I hadn't thought to do it myself. What the third video was, for any of our listening audience that might not have actually seen it for some strange reason, is former GH fan took the original video, didn't alter it in any way except he motion stabilized it so that you could see what the event looked like without having Grant's body pulling backwards.
Yeah. So in essence, if he were just to walk straight and have his jacket pulled and not be pulled backwards, that's what you're seeing. Mm-hmm. And so you're getting to just see what's exactly what is happening to the jacket without his body motion influencing the visual of it. And part of the action, like kicking his leg out and tilting his body forward like that, it adds to this effect that, oh, it looks like his jacket's getting pulled, but it's not. And that told me volumes right there. That was like the one thing that showed me, it just unraveled the whole thing for me. Mm-hmm. Because if his jacket is not being pulled, if there's no force acting upon his jacket, and the only thing moving is the fabric on his collar, then there is no way he could have felt a force pull him back and throw his leg out like that. Mm-hmm. That action had to be a pantomime. Mm-hmm. And then if you believe that, the next conclusion is that he deliberately planned that pantomime.
Yeah.
And that unravels the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And let me say, I never intended to do something like this ever.
Right.
I love the show, but I was so upset about it because I have this thing about integrity when it comes to whatever you do. I think that you have to have the utmost integrity because you have people looking up, especially when people are looking up to you for something like this. I mean, there are people that are truly... And we've watched the show enough to see that people are and especially little children, and they talk about this all the time. Children, are terrified of things. They can't sleep in their room. They claim that something's staring at them, or they see figures. That's. I mean, you think back when you were a kid, you couldn't even see like a shadow in your closet without being terrified.
Yeah, I was terrified of ghosts, and I think that some of it was due to In Search Of and all these other stories in the 70s when I grew up, dating myself, saying, we can't prove it, but we believe that this woman was killed by a ghost.
Yeah. Well, that goes back again. It makes for great television.
That was also a terrible Leonard Nimoy impression. I've got to work on that. But we'll
that's a tough one to do.
I keep on getting mixed up with them and Patrick Stewart. I only do one impression. It's terrible. But anyway,
going back to the integrity, that's what really got me fired up. I was not only upset that I was fooled, that I was taken on this ride, and I can't say that everything they've ever done is fake, but I don't know that. But I do know in my heart that it tells me that my heart and what I saw and what I've examined tells me that this is truly a fake event. You're going back to the integrity thing. If you're going to claim to have all this legitimacy and truly want to help people, then you have to have integrity. Mm-hmm. You can't let that slip, and you can't play games with stuff like this, because if children are truly getting terrorized by paranormal experiences, then you have to keep the legitimacy of what you're doing at a high level. Because you're helping people, and if you don't, then you're actually hurting them, because now nobody's going to believe that what you're saying is really happening. Because if the guys who claim to be the true Ghostbusters are not true, then who is? Mm-hmm. And that really upset me, so it got me really fired up.
All right.
And I thought, I want to show as many people what I saw. And hopefully they saw the same thing. And I'm trying not to get any attention for myself or anything like that. I just wanted to put those out there. And if you could talk to my wife, you'd see I get really passionate about things, probably more than I should.
If you actually wanted attention, you might actually tell people who you were and that sort of thing. I think it's to your credit that you're just presenting the evidence.
Yeah, I really don't want attention. I want people to see the evidence and then use their own common sense, like I said, to tell you what's happening there. And P.T. Barnum says a sucker born every second, and we're all suckers.
Absolutely.
And we all buy into things, and we want to, it's innate as human beings to trust. Mm-hmm. And when that trust is violated, it gets you really angry, and then you're not willing to trust the next guy that comes along and claims he's real.
Mm-hmm. So former GH fan had so many interesting things to say that we wound up splitting his interview into multiple parts. So tune in next week to hear us talk about the 3D reconstruction that he did of Grant's movements during the famous collar pull incident.
So that was some pretty interesting stuff.
It will have been.
Good good luck to former GH fan. We hope to see a lot more of you on the forums, and we're right there with you, buddy. Thanks for everything that you've done, because those videos really were fantastic, and we're glad that you found our site, and it's just great.
Yeah.
On to our next section now. We're going to talk about the ever-present K2 meter. Now, when did we first see this thing? When did this first enter the public consciousness of ghost hunting?
Well, it first entered the public consciousness, I believe, through a man named Chris Fleming. And it came onto Ghost Hunters for the first time in our very favorite episode, The Manson Murders.
Wait a second. But wasn't that guy, Chris Fleming, their guest investigator on that investigation?
Yes, he was.
I don't think that's a coincidence.
No, he brought that sucker along with him. There are some serious drawbacks with the K2 meter, which you can find just by sort of going on YouTube and looking up K2 meter. Let's just get down a little bit to brass tacks. K2 meter is just an EMF detector, far as I can tell. It's an ordinary EMF detector. It would pick up the same thing as the stuff that they've been waving around for a while and claiming that, first of all, they've claimed in the past that their EMF detectors don't detect ghosts, but then they wave them around and act like they're ghost detectors. So I have no idea what's going on there. I think they just decided it was showmanship and it looked good.
Yeah, well, I don't think that they believe it's showmanship, but I think that they believe two things that are mutually exclusive, and they don't seem to realize it. For instance, and this is really the human brain's tendency to rationalize things, and we all do it on, smaller or larger scales, and,
totally.
More or less important areas of our life. But in this particular case, when the ghost hunters are under the impression, or subconsciously or consciously, think that the place is haunted, then they start holding the K2 meter around saying, like, oh, well, I'm getting readings. Is this the outline of a person, or I think that there's a ghost here in the room with us. Somebody's in the room with us right now. On the other hand, if they're under the impression that the house really isn't haunted, maybe they're just not feeling creeped out, or they haven't had any personal experiences, whatever, they'll start saying, oh, well, we traced a thing and it turned out to be an electrical wire. Therefore, the ghostly experiences that you're having here are probably not valid because they're caused by the electromagnetic field affecting your brain and causing hallucinations or something. And to be fair, maybe it's not always their conscious or subconscious feeling. Maybe it's whether or not they find an electrical source. But the bottom line is it does make for some comedy, because there was one particular investigation. I forget which one it was. It wasn't Seven Sisters Inn, but it was right around there. One particular investigation where they had EMF readings and they traced to a source, and they believed that the sightings were real, so they kind of came up with a hybrid theory where they couldn't reconcile the two things, so they ended up saying that they think that the EMF field from the electrical outlet was somehow causing or making it easier or giving energy to the spirit that was appearing there.
Yeah.
So now we have just like a completely new theory that's been thrown in there, and it shows you just how, I don't want to say comedic, but it shows you just how unscientific these quote-unquote theories are. It's just kind of coming up with a rational way that you just say, oh, well, that makes sense, so maybe it's true. Well, maybe it's true, but we have no reason to believe it is.
Well, Mike, it seems pretty clear to me. If I'm in there with an EMF detector and I get a high reading, that means one of two things. One, that there's a ghost there, or two, that there absolutely isn't.
Yes, that's true.
So, it seems pretty clear. But then they've got the K2 meter, and the only special sauce, as far as I've been able to tell with the K2 meter, is that it's got LEDs on the front. It's just an EMF detector with fewer controls than your average EMF detector. It costs about, say, twice to 3 times as much as a comparative EMF detector should, and it lights up into the dark. That's it. It's such a lousy unit baseline that you can